Many supernatural stories are very, very difficult to describe. This one I wanted to tell you involving Pastor Gardner. When my financial life came to a screeching halt, I was constantly online trying to search for different opportunities to make money. And as a result, I found other people just like myself, and I found this one woman, and her name is Grace. And we talked, and we kept in touch, and we cried on each other's shoulders, and we always had different business ideas shuffling back and forth. And due to a series of supernatural experiences, my financial life started to improve dramatically. And to the point where I had no money whatsoever, living off of quarters, dimes, and nickels. Through a very unusual set of circumstances, I received a call that changed my life, which is another supernatural story. So as we continued, I sent her money, and I tried to help her as much as I could because I knew that she had 2 small children and she had kids. And when my first paychecks came in, actually it was 2 checks at the exact same moment in time. One was for $19,000 and one was for $3,000. And although I was hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt and owed everybody I could think of, I felt so grateful for this new blessing that had come over my life after not having any money for so long. So one day she called me out of the blue and she said, Molly, I have this friend, he's a pastor and he really, really needs money. He needs exactly $3,000. Well, the irony was I received a $19,000 and a $3,000, so I decided to sow this $3,000 into this pastor that I had never met. And I can remember cashing the check, going to Western Union. Actually, I remember passing $100 off to the side to a guy that was sending money to his mother, and I sent this $3,000 to Pastor Gardner. And after I did it, I started to question, Molly, you're crazy. Molly, why did you do that? You needed the money. You don't even know this man, and all these questions. And then the one that I had given the 100 to, I so happened to see again. He was standing next to me as I was filling out the form for the $3,000. And he told me how he started going to church and how he started reading the Bible because he never in his life experienced a complete stranger handing him $100. So I thought, Lord, maybe the miracle in all of this isn't the $3,000 that I sowed into this pastor. Maybe it's the $100 that the guy just so happened to be there to receive the blessing also. And about 3 weeks later, I received a phone call that my father had gone into a coma. The pastor that I sowed into was in Miami, and my father was in Fort Lauderdale. And I could not leave where I was in Puerto Rico until Monday, which I had already had a ticket to go visit him anyways. But I had just gotten this brand new job, this brand new blessing over my life, so there was no way I could jump on a plane and see my father. So I had this idea to call this pastor. The pastor was there so quickly that I recently found out that he wasn't right near the hospital, that he flew the minute he got the phone call. He so happens to be an African American. My father's is white. So when they got to the hospital, they told him he couldn't go in because he wasn't family. Now, there was no denying we couldn't really explain that he was family. So he was a pastor, so he was allowed in. So he was able to pray with my father before he passed away and spend time with him and really basically be my surrogate until I could get there. So I thought, wow, this is really amazing how God works, that I had no idea that I wouldn't be able to have somebody in Florida to go on my behalf just via being obedient for this $3,000. As you can imagine, after my father passed away, the pastor and I had become very good friends in his family, and actually we flew him to the Virgin Islands to say his memorial service, and it was just a very magical service, and we became very good friends, and he loved all my family loved him and his wife and his 2 children. It was just really magical. And he was from Jamaica, so coming back to St. Croix was really lovely for he and his wife. So we maintained friends, and we became we kept in touch, and that was in 2011. And then we went to after the funeral service, we stayed in touch, and I would speak in his church, and I went up to his church about in October of 2013. I happened to speak in his church, And actually, I was in a very difficult situation. I was with family, and I didn't know if I should break away, and it was just a very challenging decision. But I went to go speak at his church, and his wife, who had been substantially overweight, had lost maybe 30 or 40 pounds. And I said, wow, you look great, you look great. And she was very weak and lethargic, and she said, be careful what you pray for. She'd gotten cancer, and all the chemo had really induced the weight loss. And because of his faith, our faith, her faith, it was never mentioned that she was in stage 4 and that she'd only had months to live at that time. So we he found someone in Barbados that could do some natural medicine after all the doctors had said in Florida. They said, no, there's no way, there's nothing we can do to help. It's over. And he refused to accept that it was over. He knew God had more plans for her. So he decided to take her to Barbados, and he got in the plane, and he really went in faith. Someone was providing him housing. He had no money. And she kissed her children goodbye, and he'd packed for months to go down to the natural path in Barbados. And when he was 35,000 feet above ground, he glanced over, and he saw what he thought was his wife was asleep. And as he continued to nudge her, she had passed away in the air. As traumatic as this was, as it's so impossible to imagine that you're in an airplane, your wife dies, and you're sitting next to her, and you're completely powerless. They called the doctors on board. They tried to resuscitate, but it was over. And just as all this crisis was going on, the pilot announced, due to extraneous circumstances, we need to land this aircraft in San Juan, Puerto Rico. And he says he remembers that thought, as crazy as everything was. He said, oh my gosh, San Juan, that's where Molly is. And there was lots of commotion, and I couldn't break away from my new job. So my incredible husband went over and helped him every step of the way as he got challenged in the airport. What happened to his wife, essentially accused of the unimaginable. And my husband took him. We took him in for 3 days. He practically landed on our house because we live across from the airport. And we took care of every possible detail for this man who had absolutely nothing. And now we can see God's hand, that he needed that time to regroup. He had to wait 3 days for all the forensic reports and death certificate. And, we were able to pay a lot of the funeral, the embalming and everything that she needed. And we were just so grateful that God used us in such a mighty way, as God used him in a mighty way in our life. And we knew with all these uncanny, incredible, unusual circumstances that God had this all planned long before we ever met.